we just have a really quick video showing you how to use Visual Studio Code to run your programs. So when you open Visual Studio Code, you'll have kind of an empty directory that has a welcome file. You can click on this Explorer over here to see what you can open, and you'll have something over here that says open a folder, because it'll say you have nothing open or no directories open. So you want to create a folder. I named mine MinePi, and I left it in my user directory. You can kind of do whatever you want with this. You can name it whatever you want. You can put it in your documents or your user directory or your desktop, wherever you want to. It doesn't really matter. So that's the main bit of that. And then you can go ahead and add new files within this screen. So I can add a test file.py. You want to end in .py. Once you do that, it is exceptionally likely that Visual Studio Code will pull up a couple of warning boxes down here that pop up and say that you don't have a Python linter or have a Python, various Python files installed for this. You do want to go ahead and install those. Those are what make it so that your code is all nicely formatted. So it colors various things correctly. Here, let me close this. When I go ahead and hit enter here, it'll keep me indented like I want to be indented so that I stay within this definition of a square. It will help me auto-complete things, and I can just tab complete, and it gives me a list of what the possible options are for the classes I'm working with. So that's all super handy. Go ahead and install those. So here we have what I've already done as a test file. Ignore this part for a moment. We'll get to that. But basically, all I'm doing in here is adding the same thing I did to my interpreter. So these, I am importing the various libraries that I would like to use. I am importing one extra thing now that we're in a file instead of the interpreter. And actually, I'll continue using this even in the interpreter. I have a keys file set up. This is a typical thing so that when you are sharing your code, you're also not sharing your personal information. So over here, I have a copy of my keys file. And all that's in it right now is the server name that I want to connect to and my username. Now, these are dummy names. Because the whole point of having a keys file is to obfuscate this information. So I now import keys as well, and where before I was having you put in a fake server name, now I have keys.servername, and I also have keys.username, and those will put in the server and username that I want based on my keys file. So all that's important here is that you import it and that file lives in the same directory that the Python file that you're also running lives. So that's how it knows how to find it, since we haven't installed it as a full library like we did with MinecraftStuff and mcpi. So that is something that's super useful. Again, that's in the same directory as my Python file that I'm wanting to run. It's named keys.py. The second detail is that up at this top, you have this little bit of code here, and this tells your computer how you want this code to be run. So it doesn't, your terminal down here doesn't look at the .py at the end and decide that it's going to run Python, because even if it could, it still wouldn't know whether you wanted to run Python 2 or Python 3, or even where to find Python on your system. So this up here tells the terminal how to run everything in this file. That may be different for Microsoft and for whatever Linux operating system you have. This should work for any Windows or any macOS operating system, and I will paste in the classroom files what the appropriate lines are for Windows and for a basic Linux operating system. But basically what it comes down to is finding where Python 3 is installed and going ahead and putting it in there. So I can go down here and say which Python 3, and it'll tell me it's in user bin Python 3, and I could go ahead and put that here. The only reason I'm doing it slightly different is if Python 3 moves, this will keep working with the way I have it set up because it's set in my environment variables. But if something's not working for you, you're going to type into a terminal which Python 3, and whatever it comes out with right here, you would put that after the exclamation point up here. Because that's where your Python 3 is running from. Again, I'm doing it this way because that way if for some reason my Python 3 decides it wants to move, I decide I want to move it, this will stay valid. Okay, so we have setting up that we're running Python. We have the various libraries that we're importing, including the one we created ourselves called keys. You don't need to import that. It's just kind of handy to get in the habit of storing your private information in a separate file. And then this is our normal setting up the server, finding my ID, finding my position. Here I'm creating my turtle because that seemed like a fun thing to do. And here, here's where it gets a little bit different. Right here I have created a function. So I only did this to show you something else. And because functions are really the right way to do what we've been doing with the squares rather than pasting this code multiple times. So this right here is a function. I am defining the function square. Right now it doesn't have any input variables. I put a colon after my definition, and then I need to make sure all of these are indented the same amount. And that really matters in Python. So if I indent this one with 2 spaces and I indent this one with 3, that's clearly a problem, and your interpreter will show you that it's on a different line with these various lines showing down. Sorry, your development environment. But there's another detail that if I were to tab this over in a text editor rather than in my development environment here, a tab and a space can look the same, but they are treated differently. So one of the number one problems that comes up in Python is someone thinks their spacing is correct and it is not. And again, that's why we're using a development environment, because it will make sure that our spacing is consistent unless we actively try to mess it up. So I've defined what a square is here. Note that I made sure to finish the square by turning right at the very bottom. And then down here, I'm calling the function square. So that's where I'll do that. Eventually, what we'll want to do is create another file that has all of our functions in it so that we can have our functions defined and then what the code we're going to be doing defined. We can also use the functions in this file in our interpreter, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. So here we have this. The next step is to run it. And I'm going to go ahead and copy everything from my test.py over to my testfile.py because I want to show you what happens when you run a brand new Python file for the first time. So I'm going to save that. And then down here, I need to make sure that I am in the directory that I want to be, which is my minepy directory. In order to get this terminal, if you don't have it, you can go up here and do terminal, new terminal, and it will put it there for you. You should be able to move this around if you're in full screen to where you want it to be, or use some of the other files up here to be able to do things. I want to undo what I just did though. No, I don't want to get more of those. So close. This is the problem with these things. Sometimes you get things you don't mean to get. So let's go here. I want to try and close out of this window. There we go. There. Now I just have the one window. Okay, so down here in my terminal, I'm in the directory I want to be. If I were not, I could cd change directory into it. And now I want to run that file. And the way I do that is I do testfile.py. And I hit run. And it's going to say my shell is telling me that permission is denied and I can't run this file. And the reason for that is I created the file, but I did not make it executable. I did not tell the computer that this is a file that we can run. The way I do that is I chmod. Okay, let's look at this first. If I ls-l, so I'm listing the files, but I'm listing them in the long sense. I'm getting all of the information about them. If I go down here, you can see that I have some permissions over here. The R stands for read, the W stands for write, and the X down here stands for executable. The first set of information is for the user. The second set of information here is for the group. And the third here is for everybody. Okay, so as a user, keys.copy, I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit easier. Keys.py. I can, as the user of it, the owner of the file, I can read it and I can write it. The group, anyone in my group can just read it, and everyone who uses the computer can just read it. And so if I look at my test.py file, I, as the owner, can read it, I can write it, and I can execute it. Someone who is in my same group can read it, and they can execute it. And anyone using my computer can read it and execute it. So I want to make my testfile.py executable for everyone. So I chmod. I've always thought of this as changing the mode, but I'm sure it stands for something a little bit more complex. And then I do an A for all plus X for executable. So I am adding to everyone, to all people, the ability to execute this file, testfile.py. And I hit enter. And now if I /testfile.py, I should be able to execute it. And we should see my sloth create a square over here in Minecraft world. Where's my turtle? There's my turtle. I've got a couple of extra turtles here from running extra things. Unfortunately, you can beat a turtle and it'll go away. So there's my turtle. It executed the file. Now, an interesting other thing you can do, and this is the last thing we're going to do because I understand this is some new material, is I can go over here. I can run the Python interpreter in this MinPy file. So I can run Python 3. I can import test.py. No, just test. Okay, now I think we just made another turtle run. Yes, which I didn't mean to do. But since when I imported it, it ran the square down there. it ran the square here. But then I can do this again. I can say test.square, and I can make my turtle run again. Now, it's not going to come up with my direction again or anything. Those are things that we would have to code better into our function definition. What I would do is I would come over here and I would put my position, a set position, into there. I would do things like add variables to our definition of the square so that we could say how long we wanted each side of the square to be, and various things like that. But that just shows you the very beginning of what you can do by creating a file that has some functions for you. So again, this was kind of a lot of new material for a lot of you. If you have questions, please ask them. And I will be around tomorrow, that's Wednesday, from, 2 to 2:45, I believe, to answer questions about various things before y'all get on the world together and play from, I believe it's 3 to 5, but you'll have to look at the calendar to make sure. So go ahead and ask questions, and I will do my best to answer them. Go ahead and try things, and if you get error screens that you don't understand, just take a screenshot and send me a picture, or try and copy the text and send me the text, and I will see what I can do to help you.